Today's lesson is on comparing decimals, and our essential question is, how do I compare decimals using place value? So we are going to use the grids and place value charts to help compare our decimals. So the first two decimals that we are going to compare are are 0 and 67 hundredths and 0 and 47 hundredths. I'm going to place each one of these decimals into the place value chart. I have no holes, 67 hundredths. I draw a line. I'm going to put the other decimal underneath of it. Okay, so if I were to model this decimal on my grid, I have 100 spaces on my grid, so I would need to shade 67 of them. I know that each column is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then I would shade 7 individual squares, okay? For this one, I would do 10, 20, 30, 40, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let's look at it on the place value chart. Now, this one's pretty straightforward, so you might already be saying it's 67 hundredths is 67 hundredths, and it is 67 hundredths. You are right, it is 67 hundredths is larger. So that I'm going to put my inequality sign, or my mouth, my alligator mouth, is eating the larger one. Okay, but let's take a look at it in the place value chart. The reason why 67 hundredths is larger than 47 hundredths is because of this tenths place value. When we look at our ones, we have no holes. Either decimal has no holes, so we move to the next place value. This decimal has 6 tenths and this decimal has 4 tenths, which means that if we look at the model, this decimal has 6 columns shaded and this decimal has 4 columns shaded. So that makes 67 hundredths greater. All right, let's try another one. We're going to compare zero and 14 hundredths compared to 0 and 15 hundredths. Okay, if we were to use our grids, neither one has a hole, so I don't need to shade in any holes, but both of them have 1/10. So that means I would shade in 1 column because I have 1/10. There's 10 columns on the grid, both of these have 1/10. So I shade in 1 column. This one would have 4. It has a 4 in the hundredths place, so that's 4 individual squares. This one has a 5 in the hundredths place. Now I'm going to write my decimals in my place value chart, and you're probably already screaming at the computer, it's 15 hundredths, it's 15 hundredths, it's 15 hundredths. I know that one's bigger. Okay, and you are right, 15 hundredths is larger. Again, though, it's very important that you understand why 15 hundredths are larger. They have the same amount of tenths, but this decimal has 1 more hundredth. 5 hundredths versus 4 hundredths. This decimal has 5 more hundredths. It has 1 more little square shaded than this one. All right, let's do one more. We're going to compare 0 and 94 hundredths to 0 and 49 hundredths. And again, you're probably yelling at the computer. You know which one is larger already. Okay, but my concern here is I want to know how you know that one's larger. Okay, that's where the deeper thinking comes in. How do you know that 0 and 94 hundredths is larger? We're going to put it in the place value chart. All right, what place value is letting you know that 0 and 94 hundredths is larger? I'm pausing because I'm waiting for you to answer. Hopefully you're saying it's the tenths place value. This decimal has 9 tenths and this decimal has 4 tenths. That means that this one must be larger. So really what our trick here is, boys and girls, is that we go place value by place value. Okay, until we find out which decimal has a larger place value. All right, let's look at some different examples. Okay, now it gets a tad bit more tricky because now we're going to compare tenths to hundredths. Okay, so we have 5 tenths and 9 hundredths. And I always have somebody say it's 9 hundredths because 9 is bigger than 5. Boys and girls, this is not a 9. This is 9 hundredths, which means that 9 of these squares are shaded. 9. This is 5 tenths, which means that 5 whole columns are shaded. Now, which one has more shading? I hope all of you are saying that the 5 tenths has more shading. Okay, let's put these numbers in our place value chart. All right, and what does our place value chart tell us? Well, each one has 0, 1, 0 holes, so we move over to the next place value. This one has 5 tenths, and this one has 0 tenths. If we look back over at the grid, it's showing this one has 5 columns shaded. This one has no columns shaded. It has 9 hundredths shaded, 9 individual pieces. So we're comparing, that has 5 tenths, that has 0 tenths. The one with the 5 tenths is larger. Okay, very important that you don't think that that's a 9 and that's a 5 and think 9 is bigger than 5. All right, let's try another one. Okay, so now we're comparing 6 tenths and 6 hundredths. Again, I don't want you to say, well, they're both 6s, they're equal. No, boys and girls, they're not equal. The 6s are not in the same place value. I'm pausing to let you try to think of what the answer should be. Okay? I hope you're imagining this one should have 6 columns shaded because it's 6 tenths. Okay, this one is 6 hundredths, which means that it only has 6 individual squares shaded. Which one is larger? I hope you're seeing 6 tenths is larger. And we're going to put them in the place value chart so we can see. 6 tenths, 6 hundredths. Again, all we would have to do was go place value by place value. They both have 0 holes. We move over to the next place value. This one has a 6 in the tenths, and this one has 0 tenths. That makes this one larger. All right. Well, let's do one more. All right, I'm going to let you think about it for a minute. I'm going to write it in the place value chart while you think about which one is larger. Okay, and now, right now, actually what I want you to do, and I should have said this when the video first started, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go get yourself paper and pencil. We should have been writing these down so that we're ready to go over them when class starts. Okay, if you do not have paper and pencil, pause the video, go get it, and write these down. All right, so hopefully you have looked and you have noticed that neither one of them have holes, and one has 3/10 and one has 1/10. So 3/10 is larger than 1/10. You're done. You've already found the larger decimal. Okay, again, that is not a 12 and that is not a 3. So you cannot say, well, 12 is bigger than 3. It's not a 3 and that's not a 12. Okay, we go place value by place value. And if we represented it on our models, now remember our goal too was eventually we should not need models anymore. This one has 3 whole columns shaded. This decimal has a 1 in the 10ths place, so that's 1 column shaded, and then 2 hundredths, which is 2 squares shaded. Which again proves why 3/10 is larger. All right. All right, let's look at some ones that might be a little bit tricky. Again, you should have paper and pencil. You should have paper and pencil. All right, I want you to think about those two. You should be writing them down with your paper and your pencil. You should be putting your inequality sign or your greater than, less than symbol inside. I'm going to go ahead and write them in the place value chart. Okay, what do we notice? They both have a 0 in the holes, and they both have 6 in the 10ths. This one has a 0 in the hundredths, but you could put a 0 here if you wanted to. That doesn't change anything. To me, they look like they're the same decimal. To me, they look like they should be equal. They both have 6/10 and no hundredths. Now, you have a hundredths grid and a tenths grid. How could you show it on different grids? Well, 6/10, you color 6 out of 10. 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, 60 hundredths. If you colored 60 of these, it would end up looking just like that one because each column is 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I'm still coloring 6 columns. 60 hundredths, 6/10. They are equal. They are equivalent. All right, let's try another one. All right, I'm going to let you think about it and write it down on your paper and put your greater than, less than symbol. I'll go ahead and write it in the place value chart. And you should be about finished. Okay, so hopefully we've realized that this is the larger decimal. It has an 8 in the 10ths place. Okay, remember we go place value by place value. And as soon as I see this place value, this has an 8, this has a 0, I have found the larger decimal. Okay, but it is very important that you understand what it looks like on a model. I would shade 8 of these, 8 whole columns to represent 8/10. How many are shaded on this one? That's right, only 8 individual pieces are shaded. Okay, much different. All right, let's try a last one on this slide. All right, you should have it written down on paper. You should be putting your greater than less than symbol. They are what, boys and girls? They are equal. How do we know they're equal? They both have a 2 in the 10th place and no hundredths. Okay, this one says 20 hundredths. How would I show that? I would shade 2 columns, 10, 20. This one says 2 tenths. How would I shade 2 tenths? Well, there's 10 columns. I would shade 2 of them. Okay. All right, so this is where your independent work comes from. Okay, so I want you to pause the video. You have 10 comparisons to work out. The directions say copy these on paper, use greater than, less than, or equal to compare the decimals. Be ready to share during our class meeting. By the way, a pop-up is going to appear in the lower part of your screen. That pop-up is your quiz. So the quiz is inside of the PowerPoint. It's not separate anymore. I figured it out because too many people were taking the quiz without watching the lesson. So you're going to have a pop-up at the bottom of the screen. I want you to click on it, and then your 5-question quiz will come up. Okay? All right, copy these down on paper, 10 of them. If you need a place value chart to help you, I want you to go back to I want you to go back a little bit and get a look at the place value chart that was in the lesson. You can copy that down on your paper and that can help you. Okay, be ready to go over these when we meet.